Hey there guys, it's Metagames GX here, and we are going to be talking about the biggest problem that Branded has next format, and that is going to be Draco Tale. Draco Tale is projected to be the best deck of the next format in my opinion, and in a lot of other people's opinions, because the ban list didn't end up actually hitting the deck's most powerful plays. Yes, Ketu to 1 is a significant hit, and Malulu to 1 also definitely hurts consistency. However, with the Fallen of the White Dragon coming out, this deck basically ends up not missing too much, especially with the Magistus Spoon as well, making the Magistus Dracotail branded version. But these decks are going to be basically, Dracotail branded variations are going to be one of the top two decks probably. So we need to have a game plan for this deck. I think any deck in the game currently has to have a game plan for that deck. If you're going to the YCS, the 300th YCS coming up, come say hi to me over in Richmond. But either way, you do have to have a game plan for Dracotail. So today I want to talk about what Branded's game plan for Dracotail is, what the best end board that you can make for against Dracotail, and then also the tech cards that I'm using to beat Dracotail. And just talking about in general what I've found, what some of my testing partners have also commented on, because overall from the people I've talked to who are better branded players than me, we've really all come to the same conclusion, even separately, that Dracotail was always the hardest matchup for branded into this new format. Through testing alone, it's just if you go second into that deck and you don't have a main deck that's basically catered against Dracotail, you are likely losing that game. And even going first, it's not guaranteed because of turn 0 Fimena being just so strong, and then also being hand trapped on top of it, because Dracotail still is able to run 12 to 16 hand traps, including Fimena, which is just such an insane card, right? Like, this is probably the card that should have went to 1 overall instead of Ketu, or I guess Ketu and Fimena to 1 would have been a way better hit than Malulu to 1, honestly. The Malulu to 1 felt completely useless, but being able to be blown out by Fimena is just kind of crazy on your own turn. So we're going to talk about how to stop that, because you do have plays that can stop that. Shout out to Fallen the Virtuous and Christia. But I did want to talk about just what our game plan into that is, how I'm deck building into that, and then we'll show you guys kind of the standard end board that you want to make against Dracotail, and then also just going second interactions that will definitely, that you'll be able to win on if you run certain non-engine in your side in your main deck. Alright, so what I've done with my main deck in order to combat the Dracotail issue, and what, I've seen a lot of strategies online or just talking with people in my who I test with, it seems like there's some patterns with the Dracotail matchup. Going first mostly is just fine unless you're getting Fimeted, and we have a way to play around the turn 0 Fimena a lot of the time, and that's to set up a Christia in the graveyard and have Fallen in the Virtuous in the hand. So when you leave main phase, they're gonna get locked by Christia if they try to go Fimena and go neg 1. So that's a pretty good, option to have. I think Christia largely fixes that matchup unless they open the Fallen and the Virtuous, and sometimes they will, and that's just what it is, but they're going to be down a few cards at that point, and that's where you can use some of your other really important cards like Branded Retribution and Tri-Brigade Mercourier, which basically insulate your board through like a Ketu Warrior Rahu being resolved, or just like, obviously in the case of Retribution, being able to negate the Ketu, and with only one Ketu now, Retribution's actually has gotten stronger against Dracotail. It's a good grind game piece in Branded. I'm able to get to Branded Fusion through Cartesia and Quem and Shrouded by having Retribution in the deck. And then also, I think it's just the best end board piece in your engine for the Dracotail matchup in general. So that's why I think Retribution should probably be one of the bricks that you can run. But I can foresee in like future formats where Dracotail isn't as relevant, and maybe you don't have to have like, there's no real like fusion deck that's going to be too oppressive or tier 1, so that you don't have to run Retribution. But when Ash Blossom's the only card that can quite stop like the Ketu or the Rahu, at least in my main deck, right, like you can run things like Light and Darkness Dragon Lord, which I do think is pretty good into this matchup, especially with Ketu going to 1. So that is something that you can consider to run in this matchup. However, those are my going first strategies, the Christia, Mercourier, Retribution. So, and then also going second, I think that having things like, well, actually I do want to mention Sanctifier. I do think Sanctifier is really good into this matchup, because it allows you to play around certain things, like whether it's Bestials or, having it came up for me a couple times in my testing in the matchup, just having the Sanctifier on top of the Fallen and the Virtuous to revive the Christia, so your opponent can't just like called by you or something like that. So in this matchup, I do think that Sanctifier is actually pretty nice, all things considered. It also can't be targeted, so it's one of the only fusion monsters you can make going second into the Dracotail Horn and actually be able to kind of do something. And so I do think that it's kind of like Cashier in that respect. But going second, we do have, non-engine that works really well in favor against Dracotail, because the Dracotail traps, right, whether it's Dracotail Flame or Horn or Sting, these are going to be the hardest things to really combat while being a branded player, right? Dracotail Flame can obviously negate your branded fusion, so that's why we run things like Fallen and the Virtuous to negate, or to pop our branded fusion so that they can't Dracotail Flame it. However, we do have the Fallen and the White Dragon, which is just like such a great card into Dracotail, way better than branded fusion, even going second, because it counts as a Fallen of Albaz, so you can contact fuse off the Dracotail Aetherion plus the Secretarion Dragon with the Fallen of the White Dragon, and it forces a lot of their interactions just sticking one of these guys. So that's why I think Albalinatus is standard next format for Dracotail already. It's also really good crackback, and being able to fuse off or contact fuse off the Secretarion Aetherion is going to be so premium, because outing the Secretarion is going to be one of those things that you are really going to have to consider into this matchup. It's one of the toughest onboard pieces that they have, because it's a floodgate for special summon monster dragons and spellcasters. It basically says that they can't activate their effects if they're special summoned. However, you can play around this with, like I said, things like Fallen and the Virtuous, which does be to pop it. You also have Super Poly, which is pretty solid into it as well, because it is a dragon. It's a light dragon, so that's quite good typing, just depending on what you have on your board, and you might still be able to just like you can fuse off the Secretarion plus Aetherion and make a Chaos Star Source. It's not going to use its effect, but at least you cleared it, right? Now that's still going that's going kind of like nug 1 or 2 for outing the Secretarion, so that's not ideal. That's why Super Poly isn't the best breaker into Dracotail in my opinion, because a lot of the time you will trigger their graveyard effects in order to let them get more card advantage for the crackback, and I don't love that entirely. So I think like things like Forbidden Droplet is actually better going second into Super Poly, because it's just like Fallen and the Virtuous, where you can use Forbidden Droplet and get rid of the Secretarion Dragon on some level, right? And then you are also able to send for cost a card on your field, so you can send the branded fusion that's being targeted by the Dracotail Flame. So this is also one of the very good cards into that matchup, and I think that Ash Blossom is going to be standard basically in every branded list going forward, if it wasn't already, because of the Dracotail matchup. But then also its interactions into the Mulcharmies are quite good. You don't quite want to get Mulcharmied. Of course, these cards are good into Mulcharmies, but they are still on some level, you still want special a lot to get to a better end board, and that's why the Mulcharmies are so good in Dracotail, mainly Fuelos. I think Perulia is okay. You'll probably get at least a +1 off of them, which is nice, right? But I think that Fuelos is also just like the premium. This is, if you see this against Dracotail, you have a good chance of winning the game going second, and being able to see Ash Blossom, being able to stop Rahu Ketu. But I think a lot of the time, if you just have one Ash Blossom, a lot of the time you just want to save it for the Dracotail Flame, or Sting, because these two cards are so devastating against you going second, or when you're going second. Even Dracotail Horn, because it kind of messes up your ability to OTK. It lets them draw cards, so the fact that they keep being able to draw cards off of it, they probably draw into hand traps, and once again, the flame interaction on branded fusion can be really tricky. So running cards that get rid of that interaction, or running cards that can play around these, are very good. That's why I like Fallen the White Dragon. You can summon in defense position, right? Play around the Horn. But Sting is basically the one you can't really play around. So if you can save the Ash Blossom for this one, you can actually out the Flame and Horn if you go down your Synchro line, right? Because you can go Ecclesia the Black Dragon, or in the Dark Dragon, off of the Fallen of the White going second, because it sends for cost a monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz to special summon itself. And then if you used Fallen the Virtuous already, which you probably want to save this, so you probably don't, but Branded High Spirits is a very popular and very good card in Branded, which sends a card from your extract to the graveyard, and you will be going through this card like probably 33% of games, if not more. And that sets up the Ecclesia the Black to be able to spin back the flame. So, what other cards are very good into these traps, you might ask? I think things like Ghost Spell is very good because it also stops this. Yeah, it also stops the Dracotail Flame, right? Or the Dracotail Horn or Sting, because Ghost Spell interacts into these and will negate them. So that's very useful. Fusion deployment. Shout out to Marat for this. A lot of people were cutting fusion deployment, and I think it's going to be format dependent, but the thing is, though, it's a good extender, and it also is a way to special summon out Elbaz to contact Fuse off of their Secretarion. So I think that having the fusion deployment might actually be the play if Dracotail is the best deck, right? We didn't know what the ban list was going to look like. We all expected Dracotail to get hit. I expected 5 mana to go to 1 instead of Malulu, but deck is still insane because of that. So I think that fusion deployment is actually a breaker into Dracotail. So you guys see all this non-engine, this is also a breaker into that deck. So I think this overall helps round out your matchup, and right, I think that's going to be the deck to beat for Branded. If you know how, if you figure out your Dracotail matchup, you will do very well with Branded next format, because every other deck is pretty basically in your favor, in my opinion. I'm maining Super Poly. I could go to main Droplet because of the fact that Droplet does help out this is just better into the Dracotail matchup than Super Poly, but I think that Droplet's a lot worse into decks like VSK9 and Mitsurugi Yummy and, you know, whatever other decks are going to be out there that are kind of combo slot piles. So Super Poly to fuse off into Mud Dragon, so good right now, especially into Radiant Typhoon. This card's insane into that deck, so I think having Super Poly in the main is going to round out my game ones better and still usable into Dracotail. And Ghost Spell is also very good into Dracotail, but if I'm not running a bunch of other hand traps in the main, I'm not going to exactly see the benefits of Ghost Spell. I can't pair it with another hand trap a lot of the time. I mean, I do have the Charmies. I'm just preferring a Charmy Breaker approach right now because how Dracotail is looking right now, I don't think I'm going to be in the position to main 20 hand traps and still be able to outgrind that deck. The Ghost Spells are going to stay in the side deck for now, but this is something you could also consider maining if you want to overcompensate for Dracotail in your main deck. And then one other note on the main deck before we go and show off the ideal end board, I think like the Solemn cards are quite good into Dracotail, right? When a monster would be summoned. You could use Solemn Warning, which is at 3. It's basically Solemn Judgment into Dracotail, so this card's quite good. And then Solemn Judgment, of course. You could also run Dragon's Mind or Dragon's Breath, one of the two. A more relevant one. For other Super Poly targets into Dracotail, I think Secretarion is okay. Mud Dragon's not great, but it's there. I think cards like Nib and Droll you should stray away from in this matchup. They're not very good. I think Nib can be good because of the new Fallen of the White Dragon. Don't have the way to search it. If they're playing Magistus, then they're going to do an anti-Nib out anyway, so that's something that I think you should consider. And also Evenly Matched is quite good, but I find myself losing more games not having the Evenly sometimes. Or I mean having the Evenly because they just still are able to draw a bunch of cards, use their traps, and still have hand traps. So this is just going to be an example of what you can do for an anti-Dracotail end board for Branded, how you can kind of get all the pieces in rotation that you need. So we can go for Branded and High Spirits here. I'm going to send the Albion to the graveyard. This could be really like a Fallen of Albaz as well, or just like a Bestial, very common thing that you'll have in your hand playing Branded. And then we can go for Fallen of the White Dragon, and now we can go for Fallen of the White Dragon to then send to the graveyard the Albion the Branded Dragon, which will then be able to special summon itself. This is all in main 1 as well, of course. We can then go Fallen of the White Dragon to special summon out the Ecclesia. We're going to need a light and dark discard for this one, but that's alright. We're just going to use the second Cartesia for that. And then we will synchro off for the Ecclesia, and then go for Banish. Then we can special summon out the real Cartesia, and then we can go Cartesia effect to fuse off itself, plus a light or dark, or if you're running the Golden Sword Soul, you'll have the Ecclesia on the board. And then we can go for the Grand Guignol to then send it to the graveyard. Cristio. This isn't the most ideal thing because they can end a main 5 mana us, but we're not leaving too much on the board, so it's totally fine. And we get to trigger Guignol, which can get us to Quem directly, so this is actually kind of insulated into 5 mana for the most part. And then you can go into the end phase and go for Ecclesia, obviously. And then we can go for Cartesia back to hand so that we get a discard. We can go for Ecclesia back to hand so that we can get another discard. And then we can go for Albion here. And then go for the Fallen and the Virtuous. And then we can go for the Titaniclad, which can then get us into the Quem and then Quem can send to the graveyard either Fallen of Albaz or Tri-Brigade Brigand's Kit. If you want to just revive out the Cartesia instead of adding it to your hand, we're just going to send the Albaz to the graveyard for that reason. And here we can just go Fallen of the Virtuous to summon out the Christia, because you don't want to wait on this, in my opinion. You want to make them out it, right? They can only out it if they have the Fallen and the Virtuous, so this is just, like, in my opinion, the best thing that you can be doing into that deck. And if they do have Fallen of the Virtuous, of course, you do have Ecclesia to then, banish itself out into the Albaz to, continue to play the game. Or you could just actually use Ecclesia to go out for the Mercurier. When they summon a monster, you could also go for Quem effect to then summon out Albaz. And then you will have, and this is all without Christia on the board, right? And you're gonna then be able to use the Albaz, go into Mirror Jade, right? Still have, like, those types of interruptions, which if your opponent's on, like, whatever it is, just a couple cards at that point, this isn't the worst situation. This is still just like your standard 1-card combo with high spirits, right? So if you have, let's just say, Kit in rotation or an Aluber, right? If you literally just have a single Aluber in rotation at the beginning of this turn, what you could have done is go Aluber effect, right? Go for Retribution, and now on top of this board you also have a Retribution, right? So that's just showing how basically any 2-card combo on top of high spirits is going to be able to get you to Christia, Retribution, Mercurier access, which is basically a soft lock against Dracotail. I'll just show you guys the 2-card combo to show you guys anyways. Essentially, it's kind of like having access to Fallen the White Dragon, Cartesia, and Aluber, and like I've mentioned before, this is actually a lot of the time where you'll go for the fusion line because you can bait hand traps by going Fallen the White Dragon. Then you can send a Titaniclad to the graveyard, and then you can... Actually, no, we're going to send the Dogma to the graveyard. This is actually very important to send the Dogma to the graveyard, because you'll need the Fallen and the Virtuous and the Unfazed, and then you can go Fallen the White Dragon. If they ash you there, great, you just keep playing the game, but if not, you can just keep a free Ecclesia on your board to summon out Albaz on your opponent's turn, and then here you can go Fusion Deployment to then reveal the Grand Guignol, special summon out the Cartesia. If you just have a regular Cartesia in hand, you can just special summon it as well, so this doesn't need Fusion Deployment. And then we can go Aluber effect to go for Branded Fusion. And now we just go for the standard line. We can go for Branded Fusion. And of course, right now, I'm actually not running Lubellion in my deck. And you might be like, Chris, you're crazy for that. But I think there's, like, reason for that, because, like, the Bestials can be kind of bricky at the end of the day. So I'm just going to actually... I'm running the Tri-Brigade Brigand's Kit. Here, it doesn't really matter. I actually think I can just send the Christia, and which gets that into rotation already, right? So that's pretty good. And then we can go for the Albion, and then Albion effect, banish the Aluber plus Albaz on our board, so we can keep the... Actually, no, we'll keep the Albaz on our board because we want to... We can special summon out the Albaz off of Ecclesia as an interruption. It might be smarter to actually keep this in the graveyard instead, but it's just like choosing which interruptions to lose to at that point. So we'll just keep this Albaz on board and then go for the Lubellion. And then go Lubellion effect, discard or whatever random discard. And then fuse back the Albaz that was banished plus Lubellion into the Mirror Jade. And now you can go Cartesia effect to fuse off the Albion plus herself, to then go for the Grand Guignol, and then you can go Grand Guignol effect. Since we already have Christia, we can just go for the Titaniclad. So, and this is basically getting us to our best end board that we can get against the Draco Tale deck. So what we can do now is go for the Dragon that Devours Dogma, and then add the Fallen and the Virtuous to the hand. Very important. And then we can go Albion. Albion is just going to set us a Branded Retribution, which is going to be a great negate into, whatever our opponent might have for that has, involves Draco Tale. And then we can go for the Titaniclad, and then Titaniclad can special summon out the Quem, and then Quem is going to be able to send to the graveyard. It can be Tri-Brigade Brigand's Kit, but I wouldn't at this point, because unless you fused off the Albaz, and then you can just revive the Cartesia. But at this point, we can just send to the graveyard a High Spirit so that I can just get back to my hand for a free discard. and then we can go for the Cartesia to hand, and now we can just go for Fallen the Virtuous, and then we can special summon out the Crestia, and now we have Mirror Jade plus Retribution Crestia. Fun fact, if you were running the Bestial Lubellion, right, so this might be more reason to run Bestial Lubellion, you would have Mercurier in hand, right, because you would also have Branded Lost right here. So that's just kind of what you can do with both lines of things. You don't need it to be that 3-card combo, really, but the 3-card combo, if you're running the Lubellion, can get you to Retribution, Crestia, and Mercurier on the fusion side of things, and the 2-card combo can get you to basically all of that as well on the synchro side of things. A lot of the 1-card combos too with Golden Sword Soul, you just have to miss out on, like, or just like having a light or dark discard, you'll just have to miss out on having like the Crestia or sorry, not the Crestia, Mercurier Retribution, but I would prioritize the Crestia. This is definitely the most important thing into the Dracotail matchup, and will most likely win most of your games against it. And then as well, like I mentioned, just having the Fallen and the Virtuous in the rotation to special summon out Crestia is going to be really important while trying to leave main phase. So a lot of the time you aren't just going to have 1-card hands like we were just showing off, right? You're going to probably have a Luber on top of that. And if you don't get hand trapped, then you can greed for it and then go for the Fallen and the Virtuous in the hand to special summon out the Crestia when you leave the main phase, and then they just lose on the spot. So Fav rotation, I think running Retribution, all the things that we mentioned before are going to be really important for beating this matchup. Did I include everything to really beat the Dracotail matchup for Branded, right? Let me know down below. Do you guys have secret goo that I missed out for the Dracotail matchup? Things that I missed, let me know. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. Subscribe today. We're on the road to 20,000 subscribers. You can pick up my branded spreadsheet over on metagamesgx.com if you want to get a spreadsheet of almost 200 branded combos that are all Burst Protocol ready. Great resource that gets updated almost every week, basically, at this point with new combos and deck lists. So, and then it's a great way to support the channel. You can grab merch on my channel as well to support the channel. We're going to start selling sleeves soon, so look forward to that as well. Check out my sponsor links down below, Conks Cards, if you want to pre-order your Burst Protocol singles, and then also you can click the join button to become a channel member, all that fun stuff, all the standard stuff. So with that being said, we'll be seeing you guys later. MadGamesGX signing out. Bye now.